I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dim, and the light hadn't reached the kitchen yet. My phone buzzed once. Just once. I picked it up without giving it much thought. The message appeared, short and cold, as if it had been typed in a rush in the middle of the night. "We moved out last night. You can keep Max if you want." No name, no explanation, no apology. Just that one line. Right below, it was a photo. Max sitting in the backyard, his leash pulled tight, as if he had tried to get to the door. Mud was still stuck to his paws, his eyes wide, staring straight into the camera, the kind of look a dog gives when it doesn't understand why it's been left behind. I froze in the kitchen. The kettle wasn't on. The coffee wasn't made. The first feeling wasn't anger, but emptiness. I looked at the message for a few more seconds, then set the phone down on the table. "I'm old," I muttered to myself, "but I'm not weak." I'd lived alone in Maple Ridge for years, handling everything myself and never bothering anyone. But what happened this morning was beyond anything I ever expected. If you've ever felt abandoned without a decent explanation, stay on this channel. Sometimes a real story can remind you that you're not as alone as you think. I pulled on the jeans hanging over the chair, the jacket zipped up before I even fixed the collar. My socks didn't match, but I didn't care. I only knew I had to go. My hand grabbed the key ring from the shelf, though I couldn't remember when I had picked it up. My mornings are usually slow. I feed the birds in the yard, check the porch for dry leaves to sweep, then make my coffee. Small things, but they help the day start properly. Not today. That message stopped everything. I shut the door, got in the truck, and started the engine. The drive from Maple Ridge to Pine Valley takes over an hour, but this morning I didn't think about time. I only thought about Max, sitting alone in the yard, not understanding what had happened. Once I left town, my mind drifted back to recent things. The last dinner I had with Jason and Emily, something felt off at the table. Noah kept holding his phone, and I told him, "Put it down, kid. Watch it after you eat." Emily set her fork down softly, not looking at me. Jason gave an awkward smile and quickly changed the subject. I thought they were just tired. Then Jason rarely called back. I phoned twice. Both went to voicemail. Later he texted, "Busy with the kid." Just a few words, but I could feel the distance in them. And the time I dropped by unannounced, I only brought some fresh cookies. Emily opened the door for barely a second before her face changed. Not angry, just not wanting me there. Jason stood behind her and said quietly, "We've got things going on today." I got the hint and left, but clearly the distance had started long before that. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Could things really be so bad they'd leave in the middle of the night? I wasn't angry at them. I just wanted to know what I had done to cause them to leave in this manner. The truck rolled past the old neighborhood where I used to take Noah to the park when he was 3 years old. I remembered him running around with a ball, sweat on his tiny forehead, a sweet kid who always called Grandpa whenever he saw me. It had been a long time since I heard that. The road ahead was long and empty. Inside the truck, only the engine and my thoughts grew louder the closer I got. I didn't know what I would find in Pine Valley, but I knew one thing for sure. Max was there, and he needed me now. When I turned onto the road leading to Jason's old house in Pine Valley, I had prepared myself for something unpleasant. But when the truck stopped, the first thing I saw was emptiness, a kind that didn't feel real. The yard was strangely clean. No folding chair Emily used every afternoon, no toy car Noah used to leave on the steps. The walkway to the front door had no tire marks or random boxes left around. Looking through the window, I saw the inside had no curtains, empty like a newly built house. I stepped into the yard, my boots sinking lightly into the damp soil left by last night's rain. No sound except the rustle of my jacket. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that comes from leaving too fast and too completely. Then I saw Max. He was curled up in a corner by the metal gate. His body shivered softly like he'd been awake all night in the rain. Mud clung to his legs, his belly sunken. His ears drooped, his eyes open but dull, as if he no longer had the strength to react to anything. I walked closer. That's when I noticed the patch of ground under him had been dug up. Looking more closely through the mud, I recognized a blue knit hat. Noah's, the one he always wore in winter. Next to it was an old rubber ball with torn edges. Both were buried in the wet dirt Max was trying to lie on, as if protecting them. I knelt down and picked up the hat, wet and muddy, but still unmistakably blue. The old ball was light, with Max's teeth marks still visible. I looked at Max. These were clearly the things he had tried to hold on to when everything else was taken away. "Max," I called gently. He lifted his eyes a little, then lowered them again. He didn't stand, didn't come closer. When I stepped toward him, he curled tighter, scared he'd be dragged somewhere else again, like the last time. I sat down, leaning against the fence. I didn't try to touch him. I just sat, my hands resting on my knees. 5, maybe 7 minutes passed. The wind carried the smell of wet earth through the yard. Max barely moved, but I noticed the tension in his eyes easing. He watched me longer, without looking away, not trusting completely, but no longer terrified. I reached slowly for the chain. The moment I touched it, Max stepped back, trembling harder. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just backed away because he feared being taken somewhere else, like before. I pulled my hand back immediately. "It's okay, Max, I'm right here." I took a deep breath, settled myself, and stayed still. After a while, Max inched closer, slow but steady. I reached again, gently, lower than before. This time, he didn't pull back. I unlatched the chain, his shoulders loosened. He let out a long breath like he'd been holding it for days. When I lifted him, I flinched at how light he was. Light in the way a dog gets when it hasn't eaten properly for days. I placed him in the truck, then looked back at the small patch of dirt he had guarded all night. Just a little mound. But to Max, it might have been all that was left of his old family. I closed the door and buckled my seatbelt. "Let's go, Max. We're going home." I let Max rest in the truck and stepped into the house. The front door wasn't locked. I pushed it lightly and it swung open, as if no one cared enough to close it. Inside, completely empty. The living room, which had been cluttered with Noah's toys, was now bare hardwood. The leather couch I gave Jason was gone. The family photos that once hung on the wall were missing too, leaving brighter squares where they used to be. My footsteps echoed through the cold, unfamiliar room. I walked deeper inside. The kitchen looked no better. Nothing on the counters except dust and a small hook on the wall, where Max's leash used to hang. The leash was still there, intact, left behind like something not worth taking. Just beneath the leash, a piece of paper was stuck with old tape. I peeled it off. The handwriting slanted. Emily's? Unmistakably. "Don't tell him anything. He'll worry. Let's just go." I read it once, then again. No explanation was needed. I understood immediately. Emily didn't want me to know they were leaving, didn't want me involved. Jason must have known, but chose to stay silent. I stood in the kitchen, holding the note in my hand, feeling as if someone had erased my place in their lives with just a few lines of writing. I remembered the time I brought cookies to their house. I knocked on the door, and Emily's expression changed not even half a second after she opened it. Not openly annoyed, but clearly guarded. She said they were about to head out, though I knew it was only an excuse. I just smiled, handed her the box of cookies, and went home. I thought it was just an inconvenient day. Then there was the time Jason said quietly over the phone, "Dad, don't worry about me so much. I can handle things." I only replied, "Yeah, I know." Then stopped talking because I didn't want to stretch the conversation. I tried not to interfere in their family matters. I kept my distance so I wouldn't be seen as the older man sticking his nose in. And yet, In the end, I still became a burden in their eyes. I folded the note and put it in my coat pocket, not to resent it, just to remind myself that some things happen without an argument. People simply leave quietly. I looked around the house one last time. There was no sign left that this place ever had children's laughter, late dinners, or afternoons when I sat on the floor and played with Noah. Only emptiness. I stepped outside and took a long breath. There are things people don't say, I told myself, but I understand now. When I got home, I opened the front door and stepped aside to let Max decide for himself. He didn't enter right away. His head poked past the doorway, sniffing quickly as if checking whether this place was safe. After a moment, he stepped inside, but only a few steps. He didn't go into the living room. He lay down right by the door, as if afraid someone might call him away again. I left him alone and went to the kitchen. I warmed up some leftover chicken broth from yesterday, the smell spreading through the room. I poured it into a bowl and set it in front of Max. He glanced at it, then turned his head away, as if he didn't want to touch anything I offered. I turned on the heater, spread a thick blanket on the warmest spot on the floor, and placed a small bowl of warm water beside it. Max still stayed by the door, unmoving. I pulled a chair close to him and sat down. I didn't say much, just watched him. Every time he shifted his posture, I noticed. Every heavy breath, every slight twitch of his shoulders, I saw clearly. I tried taking out an old toy I found in the closet, just a little rope Jason had once bought for Max. I set it down in front of him. Max only glanced at it before turning his head away. Not angry, not scared, just tired and uninterested. I didn't push. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. Max looked at me for a moment, then turned his face back toward the door. "It's all right," I said quietly. "I'm right here." In the afternoon, a few cars passed by the road outside. The noise wasn't loud, but each time Max heard it, he flinched and got up, turning toward the door like he was waiting for someone to come. Then, when nothing happened, he lay down again, slower each time, more tired. That first night, I didn't go to my bedroom. I spread a thin blanket on the living room floor and lay about a meter away from Max. Near midnight, I heard his claws tap against the floor. Max wandered through the living room, then the kitchen, then the hallway. He went room to room as if searching for a way out, or maybe searching for a familiar voice he could no longer hear. I followed him at a discreet distance, keeping my distance, not wanting to scare him. When he stopped at the back door, sniffing every crack as if hoping someone was on the other side, I stood back and waited. Eventually, he turned around and went back to the blanket I'd prepared. He lay down, his back toward me. But he didn't stare at the door as much as he had in the afternoon. The next morning, I called the vet clinic. I described Max's condition: not eating, tired, and easily startled. The person on the phone said those were signs of stress after a significant change, and dogs who bond strongly with their old owners often take a few days to adjust. "Let him settle on his own," they said. "Don't force him to eat, just keep him feeling safe." I thanked them and hung up. It eased my mind a little, but seeing Max curled up still made me worry. The first 3 days passed heavily. Max didn't eat much, only drank a little water and licked some chicken broth. He still stayed near the door, but not as close as before. On the evening of the 3rd day, while I was reading an old newspaper in the living room, I heard the soft creak of the wooden floor. Max walked toward me. He didn't bark, didn't wag his tail. In his mouth was the old rubber ball I picked up from Jason's yard that day. He set it down right next to my foot and sat in front of me. He didn't look away this time. For the first time, he looked straight at me without avoiding my eyes. I leaned down and gently placed my hand on his head. This time, Max didn't pull back. He let out a long breath as he had finally loosened something he'd been holding in. It wasn't a full recovery, but it was the first sign that he was beginning to trust me, and for me, that meant a lot. I decided to go to Brookmart on Saturday morning. I was out of milk and bread, and Max needed some soft food for sensitive dogs. The weather was cold but clear, enough for me to let Max ride in the back seat. He looked out the window the whole way. quiet but not as sad as he'd been earlier in the week. I parked near the entrance of the supermarket. Brookmart on weekends was always lively. People pushing carts, kids tugging their parents' sleeves for candy, scanners beeping in a steady rhythm. I left Max in the car, cracking the window slightly so he wouldn't feel trapped. He rested his head on the seat, watching me walk away without any sign of worry. Inside, I grabbed a basket, walked through the dairy aisle, and then to the canned goods. Usually, I took my time with these errands, but today I moved quickly, so Max wouldn't wait too long. I picked a few cans of food, a bag of dog treats, and some chicken to cook for him tonight. At the produce section, I grabbed some carrots for myself. I figured that was enough. I headed to the checkout counter and stopped. Right at the automatic exit, I saw Jason. Emily was beside him, holding a few paper bags. Noah sat in the child seat of their cart, eyes glued to a tablet screen. The three of them looked normal. Not hurried, not exhausted, not like people who had abandoned a dog in the night. Jason said something to Emily and laughed, then bent down to adjust Noah's jacket. Everything looked so peaceful, so far from me. I stood only a short distance away. If I wanted to, I could have called, "Jason!" and he would have turned around instantly. But before I did anything, Jason lifted his head and our eyes met. I saw him pause, just for a beat. He straightened, still holding the bags, but his eyes said something, like he was about to walk toward me. He really was. His foot shifted slightly. His shoulder angled toward me. A familiar reflex from the boy who used to run to me for a hug when he was little. Then Emily turned, placing her hand on his arm. Not firm, not pulling, just a very light touch. Jason stopped immediately. I saw that moment more clearly than any explanation. It wasn't that Jason didn't want to come over. He just felt things would be easier if... He didn't say anything. Noah didn't see me. He was too absorbed in his screen, legs swinging to the rhythm of the music. It wasn't his fault. I knew that. And me, I stood there, holding the basket, my chest tightening but not breaking. I wanted to call him, just say Jason. One word, but my throat locked up. I knew very well that if I called, Jason would be caught between Emily and me, between ease and discomfort. And I didn't want to make things more complicated for him. I only bowed my head slightly, a small greeting from afar that I knew he saw. Jason looked at me for another second, then gave a tiny nod, almost unconscious. Then he followed Emily out to the parking lot. I watched them walk out through the glass doors. No one turned back. No one glanced at the car, looking for Max. Everything about them looked calmer, without me in the picture. I let out a slow breath. No anger, no blame, just a quiet, deep sadness. The kind you feel when you understand every decision has its own reason. They didn't stop loving me, I told myself. They're just afraid to face it. I paid for my groceries and walked back to the car. Max lifted his head when he saw me. His eyes softened, as if asking whether I was all right. "I'm fine," I murmured, gently patting his head. The truth was, today I felt lighter, just knowing Max still chose me. That evening, the sky was overcast and a cold wind wrapped around the porch roof. I made a little chicken soup and left half a bowl for Max. He ate a few spoonfuls, then lay down in front of the heater. Seeing him calmer than in the first few days, I suddenly remembered some old photos. I opened the cabinet in the living room where I keep the album faded by years. The hardcover was slightly peeling and the corners were curled. I brought it to the table, turned on the small lamp, and slowly flipped through the pages. Each page opened carried a bit of dust from time. Photos of Jason as an 8 or 9-year-old appeared. Mud-smeared face, messy hair, but such a bright smile. In Jason's arms was Cooper, the first dog he brought home. I remember clearly the day Noah ran in carrying Cooper, breathless, saying, "Dad, please let me keep him. I'll take care of him." I pretended to be stern, warned that keeping a dog is hard. He hugged Cooper tighter and promised everything: feeding, bathing, walking. I thought he said it just to appease me, but it turned out he meant it. Once Cooper got sick and shivered through the night, Jason wouldn't go to his bedroom. He dragged a blanket to the rug and lay right beside him. I got up in the middle of the night for a drink and saw the two of them lying next to each other, a boy and his dog. Jason held Cooper as if he were holding a pillow. That sight made me realize this boy. He had more love than he thought. I touched the photo lightly. In those days, everything was more straightforward, more transparent. Now Jason is grown, has his own family, his own worries. People growing up sometimes forget they once knew how to love something simple. I don't blame him. I whispered to myself as a reminder, family isn't only the ones who stay, it's also the memories we carry. Jason may leave. Emily may not like my presence, but these memories, no one can take them from me. I closed the album and set it on the table. The soft thud was enough to make Max lift his head and look. He stood, came closer. Not rushed, not anxious, just slowly. When he reached me, he rested his head on my leg in a light but unmistakable way, as if telling me he understood some of the sadness I carried. I reached out and stroked the top of his head. "Good boy," I said softly. In that moment, I felt clearly, although not blood-related, Max was forming another kind of bond with me. Quiet and real. He was not replacing Jason. I wasn't asking him to, but he was here, beside me, when I needed something, so I wouldn't feel so alone. And sometimes, that was enough. That night was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking in the living room. I was about to turn off the light and go to bed when I noticed Max wasn't in his usual spot by the heater. The house was thin with silence, but I had a feeling he was somewhere near the hallway. I stepped out, and sure enough, Max was standing right in front of the laundry room door, staring at a low corner of the wall near the floor. He stood very still, his back a little tense, his ears pricked as if he were trying to hear something. I stood a few steps away, making no noise. Clearly he wasn't afraid, not trembling, not cowering. He looked like he was waiting. I followed the direction of his gaze. It was just an empty wall with the streetlight casting a shadow. But I understood. There must have once been footsteps or someone passing by that spot every night. Maybe Jason or Emily used to move around right in that corner, or Noah used to run past. Max stood there out of old habit, hoping to hear the familiar sound he'd lost. I called softly, "Max." He didn't turn his head. He only twitched an ear and stayed still. I didn't want to startle him, so I called again, more slowly and clearly. "Max, come here." This time, his shoulders relaxed a little. He blinked, as if deciding whether to leave that spot. Then he turned, not quickly, not eagerly, just a slight turn of the head, but I could tell he was choosing to turn toward me, not toward the past in that corner. He walked toward me step by step. When he was about an arm's length away, he stopped. I reached out gently, palm up. Max moved half a step more and placed his head in my hand, soft as if he too was tired of waiting. I sat down on the floor. Max lay beside me, leaning lightly against my knee. Just that, no barking, no exuberant welcome. But for me, that moment weighed heavier than any words. Max hadn't completely forgotten his old family, but at least he had begun to accept that here, someone was waiting for him. Familiar footsteps were getting used to again, and there was a place he could lay his head without fearing being left behind. I put my hand on his back and felt his steady breathing. "I'm here," I said quietly, saying it to him, and saying it to myself, too. That night, both of us were a little less lonely. The next morning, the sky was clearer than it had been on the previous days. The air was fresh, easy to breathe, the kind of weather that makes one want to take a walk. I looked at Max lying by the window and decided today was the day to take him out a bit. I fetched the leash. Max looked at me and didn't back away like he had the first time. I opened the front door, and this time he stepped out right away, slowly but no longer overly wary. I led him to the little trail behind the house that leads straight into the sparse woods I often walk in each morning. At the entrance, Max suddenly moved ahead of me, the first time since I brought him home. He trotted along the dirt path, nose low, sniffing at clumps of weeds, then lifted his head to look around as if reacquainting himself with the outside world. I followed a few steps behind, letting him pick the way. "Max," I called softly. He turned back immediately. Just a quick glance, but enough for me to know he heard and recognized me as the one walking with him, not someone to be wary of. After a while, I saw our old neighbor, Mr. Carter, walking his small dog toward us. He usually goes out around this time, so it wasn't surprising to meet him. I raised a hand in greeting. "Henry, long time no see," he said. "Yeah, been a bit busy lately," I replied. Mr. Carter's little dog came closer, sniffing the air. Max glanced at him for a few seconds, his ears lifting slightly, then dropping. Not afraid, not stepping back, just observing, then looking back down the path. "Is that like the one Jason used to have?" Mr. Carter asked casually. I just answered briefly, "Not anymore." He nodded as if he understood and didn't ask further. We went our separate ways. That simple encounter reminded me that ordinary life still revolves around small things, that not everything had vanished like Jason's family. When we reached an open grassy spot at the end of the trail, Max suddenly stopped. It was an expansive lawn with just the right amount of sun. He turned and looked at me. His eyes were not sad, not waiting for anyone else, as if asking, "Is this okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, sit." Max sat down immediately, then slowly stretched out on the grass. No tension, no turning to look for another path, just lying there, completely relaxed. I sat down beside him, my hands propping me up behind. A light breeze passed, carrying the scent of dry earth and leaves. Max's breathing was steady, his chest rising and falling gently. This moment was precise. He wasn't choosing the past anymore. He was choosing here. With me. And for me, that was enough to make the morning more beautiful than any before. That afternoon was tranquil, the kind of quiet that no longer feels heavy, quiet in a gentle, open way. I brought the wooden chair out to the porch like I'd been doing for years. Max followed, his tail not wagging wildly but no longer tucked between his legs like in those first days. He circled once, then lay down right beside my feet, resting his head on the top of my shoe. I set my phone on the small table next to the chair. For the past few weeks, I had kept the screen facing up, as if waiting for it to light up with a message or a call. But today, I flipped it over, face down. Just a light motion, but firm. Not because I wanted to cut off contact, just because I was no longer in the mindset of waiting. The afternoon light spread a thin layer of gold over the front yard. The last of the autumn leaves drifted down. Max raised his head now and then to follow them, then lay back down as if making sure I was still there. I thought about Jason, about Emily, about Noah. The boy was probably watching cartoons or playing games in some new house, one that no longer had this old yard. I wasn't angry at them. What remained was a soft sadness, muted and no longer sharp. I understood something. Everyone has a reason to leave. Some leave to find an easier life. Some leave because facing what makes them feel guilty is too hard. Some leave because they think silence is the least painful option. I no longer blamed them. I no longer tried to hold on. Max shifted, moving a little closer, his folded ear brushing my ankle. I placed my hand on his back. His fur was warm and a little coarse, but the way he leaned into me tugged at something inside in a quiet, comforting way. "I'm here," I said softly, not sure whether I was saying it to him or to myself. The breeze blew, making a few strands of fur on his back tremble. He took a deep breath, his whole body relaxing as if he finally believed he didn't have to go anywhere anymore. I sat still, looking at the road ahead, not expecting anyone to show up. I'm not hoping anyone will come back to apologize or explain, partly because I knew it wouldn't happen, and partly because I no longer needed it. Family, I realized, isn't just the people who've been with you from the start. Family is the ones who choose to stay, even when nothing obligates them to. And respecting older people, or anyone really, is just basic decency. Something you either have or don't have. A small act of kindness can sometimes be enough to change the course of someone else's life. For Max, a quiet spot to lie down and a hand on his back was enough. For me, it was enough to fill the space left behind by that empty house in Pine Valley. The sun sank. The evening settled slowly. On the porch, it was just me and Max, two souls who had been left behind in different ways. But now, both of us had found a place to belong. I pulled the blanket over my legs. Max scooted closer, touching my pant leg as if confirming he chose to stay too. And that was enough. For him. And for me.